For years I tried to live quietly. My little corner of Willow Creek was supposed to be peaceful. Tree-lined streets, trimmed lawns, friendly neighbors who waved when they walked their dogs. I had bought my house here because I wanted calm. I was done with chaos, drama, and loud people. But there was one person who made that impossible. Her name was Karen Miller, though everyone in the neighborhood called her HOA Karen. She wasn't an elected official, not in any way that mattered. Yet she carried herself like the President of the United States. Clipboard always in hand, heels clicking like gunshots on the pavement, lips pursed as if she was permanently disappointed with humanity. Every morning you could hear her voice before you even saw her. "Sir, that grass is half an inch too long. Ma'am, that fence shade doesn't match the approved palette." It was ridiculous. The HOA board meetings became weekly sermons of power, led by none other than Karen herself, though she wasn't even the president. She was just a committee member, but she treated that as an open invitation to patrol the neighborhood like a security guard with an inflated ego. I used to ignore her, smile politely, keep my distance, but somehow, no matter how much I tried to stay away, she always found a reason to show up at my doorstep. One day it was about my trash cans being out too early. Another time it was about the color of my mailbox. And once, I kid you not, she claimed that the sound of my lawnmower was unregistered equipment. At first I laughed it off. Everyone did. But then came the letters. Bright white envelopes from the HOA delivered like threats. Violations, warnings, potential fines, all signed by her. Always her. It was like she was playing some long, slow game to make me crack. I remember telling my friend over coffee, "One day Karen's going to push the wrong person too far." He laughed and said, "Yeah, but not you. You're too calm for that." He was right, until that one afternoon. It was a Saturday, bright and warm. I'd been cleaning my garage, reorganizing my tools, feeling proud of how spotless it looked. I left the door open to let the fresh air in and went inside for lunch. When I came back an hour later, I froze. Right there inside my garage and parked neatly like it belonged was Karen's white BMW X5. At first I thought maybe she made a mistake. Maybe it was some emergency. Maybe she'd left a note. Nope. Nothing, just the smell of expensive leather and cheap perfume. I knocked on her door across the street. She opened it with that usual expression, one part annoyance, one part authority. "Hi, Karen," I said, keeping my tone calm. "Your car's in my garage." She blinked, then said flatly, "Yes, I know." "You?" "No," I repeated. "Yes," she said, crossing her arms. There was no available parking by my house. HOA regulation allows temporary use of adjacent property if access is available. I stared at her. "Karen, that's not a thing." "It's in the spirit of the community guidelines," she said, like she was quoting scripture. "And besides, you left your garage door open. That's technically unsecured property." For a few seconds, I just stood there trying to process what I was hearing. She'd parked her car inside my garage, and somehow she was implying that was my fault. I laughed softly. "Karen, you can't just park in someone else's garage." She rolled her eyes. "Jake, it's only for the weekend." "Don't be dramatic. I have guests coming and they need space. You have extra. Be a good neighbor. Good neighbor." The words echoed in my head like a challenge. She walked back inside before I could even respond, her heels clacking away like a closing argument. I stood there for a long moment staring at that shiny white BMW sitting smugly in the middle of my garage, like a symbol of everything wrong with this woman. Something inside me shifted that day. I wasn't angry, not yet, but a quiet decision began to form, one that would change everything over the next 5 days. That was the moment I stopped being a quiet neighbor and started being the guy who finally decided to teach the HOA queen a lesson she'd never forget. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Karen's car sitting in my garage. Every time I walked past the window, that shiny white BMW stared back at me like it was mocking me. It wasn't about the car. It was about the nerve, the sheer audacity of someone who thought the rules only applied to others. I didn't want to start a war. I just wanted my space back. So the next morning I went over to her house and knocked again. Karen opened the door, still in her robe, coffee mug in one hand, clipboard in the other, because of course she had it even in her own house. "Karen," I said calmly, "I need you to move your car." She sighed, the kind of sigh people give when they think they're above you. "I told you yesterday, Jake, I'll move it Monday." The HOA has a guest event today. You should have gotten the email. I'm not part of your event, I said. Well, she said, taking a sip of coffee, you're part of the community. That makes it your concern. And then she shut the door. That was it. The line had been crossed. I stood there, for a few seconds, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. A slow burn of irritation mixed with amusement. She really thought she could do anything she wanted. Fine, I thought. Let's see how that works out for her. I walked back to my garage, took a deep breath, and hit the button. The door slid down smoothly, locking her car inside. Click. And just like that, her BMW wasn't going anywhere. I went inside, made myself a sandwich, and turned on the TV. I didn't even feel guilty. It took about 2 hours before she noticed. The first knock was polite. Then came the pounding. Jake, open this door. This is theft. I opened the front door and leaned against the frame, calm as ever. Karen, you parked your car in my garage without permission. It's on my property. Technically, it's not theft and it's storage. Storage? She screamed. You can't just keep my car. I didn't keep it, I said with a shrug. You parked it there. I simply closed my garage door. That's what homeowners do. Her face turned red. I'll call the police. Go ahead, I said. Just make sure you tell them you broke into my property and left your car there without my consent. She froze for a moment, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for the right words. Then she hissed, You'll regret this. I doubt it, I said, and closed the door. An hour later, a police cruiser pulled up. I watched from the window as Karen marched toward the officer, waving her arms and pointing at my house like I was a dangerous criminal. The officer came to my door and knocked politely. Afternoon, sir, he said. Your neighbor's claiming you've locked her car inside your garage. I nodded. That's correct, but she parked it there without permission. He frowned. Did you invite her to? No, sir, I was cleaning my garage. Went inside for lunch, came back, and her BMW was inside. She claims HOA rules allow it. The officer tried not to laugh. HOA rules don't override property rights. Karen was listening from behind him, arms crossed. He's lying. He left his garage open. That's an invitation. The officer turned to her slowly. Ma'am, that's not how trespassing works. I'm not trespassing, she yelled. I'm an HOA representative. Even representatives need permission, the officer said calmly. This is private property. For a few seconds, I thought she was going to explode right there on the driveway. But the officer gave her a clear choice. Apologize and move her car peacefully, or risk a trespass complaint. That should have been the end of it. But instead of apologizing, Karen said something that made my eyebrows shoot up. She glared at me and said, Fine. If he wants to play games, he can keep it. But as per state tenant law, that car makes me an occupant of that garage. He'll owe me eviction notice and rental compensation. Even the officer looked stunned. I said, You're claiming tenancy because your car is in my garage? Yes, she said proudly. You can't remove my belongings without notice. That's the law. I smiled, slowly, knowingly. Okay, Karen, if you're a tenant now, then you owe rent. Her confidence flickered for the first time. What? You're occupying my property, I said. That's rent. I'll send you an invoice. Market rate for garage space around here is about $100 a day. The officer actually chuckled. He's not wrong, ma'am. Karen's jaw dropped. She stormed off, muttering something about lawyers and HOA codes. The police left after reminding her not to trespass again. And that was how it all began. Over the next few days, she would try everything. Threats, fake violations, even calling the HOA board for backup. But none of it would work. Because for once, the rules weren't hers to bend. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one being pushed around. I was the one holding the keys. By the next morning, I thought maybe, just maybe, Karen had calmed down. I was wrong. At exactly 8:01 a.m., my doorbell rang. Then it rang again. And again. Like she was trying to break the button. When I opened the door, there she was. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, her expression sharp enough to cut glass. Jake, she said, her tone dripping with fake politeness. We need to talk about your recent violations. I blinked. My what? She flipped through her clipboard dramatically. You've been fined for obstruction of community access, damage to association reputation, and hostile conduct toward an HOA member. I stared at her, then burst out laughing. Are you serious? You parked your car in my garage. That's irrelevant, she snapped. You've now caused unnecessary distress and disruption to the community. Karen, the only one who's distressed is you. She didn't even flinch. You have 24 hours to release my vehicle or face escalating penalties. I folded my arms. You said your car made you a tenant, right? Yes, she said proudly. Then, I said, I'll need this in writing. For legal documentation, of course. I'll also need your ID so I can prepare your rental invoice. Her face twisted. You're mocking me. Not at all, I said. Tenants get receipts. It's the law. For a second, she didn't know what to say. She just stood there, breathing heavily through her nose like a bull about to charge. Then she shouted, You think this is funny? You'll regret embarrassing me, Jake. Karen, I said calmly. I don't think you need my help embarrassing yourself. She gasped like I'd just slapped her, then spun on her heel and stormed away. That day, I decided to take a small vacation. Nothing dramatic, just a little road trip out of town to visit a friend for a few days. Before leaving, I checked my locks, turned off the lights, and made sure the garage was sealed tight. Karen's BMW was still inside, perfectly safe and perfectly stuck. As I was packing my bag, my phone buzzed with an email. From HOA Enforcement Office. Subject, Urgent Violation Notice. Jake Thompson. I opened it. Apparently, I was now being accused of running an unauthorized vehicle storage business from my property. I laughed so hard I almost dropped my phone. She really had gone there. Still chuckling, I replied simply, Thank you for your concern. The vehicle in question belongs to an HOA member who has not paid rent for use of my property. Please direct all complaints to your newly self-declared tenant. Then I turned off my phone and hit the road. For the next few days, I didn't check messages, didn't answer calls, didn't care. I hiked, fished, read books by the lake. It felt good to disconnect. Meanwhile, back home, chaos was brewing. When I finally returned 5 days later, the neighborhood looked different. My driveway had sticky notes on it, dozens of them. Messages scribbled in angry handwriting. Unacceptable behavior. Violating HOA trust. Release the BMW. I laughed. Karen had clearly been busy rallying her troops. As I pulled up, I saw her standing in the middle of the street, arms crossed, red-faced, shouting into her phone. When she saw my truck, her eyes went wide. Where have you been? She demanded, storming toward me. You can't just disappear. I had to call the HOA emergency board meeting twice. I got out slowly, calm as ever. I took a trip. A trip? She shouted. My car has been trapped in your garage for 5 days. Oh, that's right, I said, pretending to think. Tenant rent is 5 days overdue. That's $500 now. Her jaw dropped. You can't charge me for that. Actually, I said, unlocking my front door. You said it yourself. The car made you an occupant. Occupants pay rent. Her voice rose higher. This is harassment. You're violating HOA Code 17B. Karen, I said, turning to face her. Your HOA code doesn't exist outside your imagination. That finally did it. She screamed, an ear-piercing sound that made a few curtains twitch from nearby houses. You'll pay for this, Jake. I'll make sure you're fined, evicted, blacklisted. You'll never live in this community again. I smiled calmly. Then I guess I'll move out after you pay your rent. That night, she tried one last desperate trick. Around 11 p.m., I heard noises outside. I looked through the window and saw Karen creeping around my driveway with a flashlight, trying to peek through the garage windows. I opened the front door quietly and said, Looking for something? She jumped and dropped the flashlight. I was checking for HOA violations, she stammered. At midnight? She didn't answer. She just turned and ran back to her house like a kid caught stealing candy. By that point, I was starting to enjoy this, 5 days. That's all it had been. But in that time, Karen had gone from smug to desperate. And the best part? I hadn't broken a single law. The next morning, I woke to a knock on the door. Not the usual angry pounding. This one was soft, hesitant. I opened it to find Karen standing there, looking defeated. Her hair was messy, her tone tired. Jake, can we talk? I folded my arms. About rent? She glared. About my car. I raised an eyebrow. Still not moving until this tenant issue is cleared up. Legally, you might owe me back rent. She let out a long, shaky sigh. Fine, what do you want? I thought about it for a moment. Then I smiled. I want you to stop writing fake HOA fines. Stop harassing the neighborhood. Stop pretending to be Queen of Willow Creek. Her lips trembled. And if I do? Then I'll open the garage door. She looked like she was chewing glass, but finally she nodded. Fine, I'll stop. Good, I said, handing her a small printed invoice that I'd made for fun. And just for the record, here's your rent receipt. She snatched it from my hand and stormed away without a word. As her car engine roared back to life, I stood on my porch smiling. 5 days, one lesson learned, and for once the HOA had nothing to say. For the first time in months, the street felt quiet. No HOA patrols. No early morning clipboard inspections. No Karen. I'd almost started to believe it was over, almost. 3 days later, a white SUV pulled up to my house. Out stepped 2 people in matching navy jackets, clipboards in hand. HOA board members. Behind them, like a shadow that refused to fade, stood Karen. Sunglasses on, arms crossed, smirking. Good morning, one of the men said stiffly. We're here to address several ongoing violations regarding your property. I sighed. Let me guess. Unauthorized garage storage, failure to cooperate with HOA management, and, let me think, disrespecting Karen? The man blinked, clearly unprepared for sarcasm. We take all community complaints seriously, Mr. Thompson. Good, I said. Then take mine seriously too. Karen trespassed, made false reports, and illegally parked in my garage. Karen scoffed. That's absurd. You locked my car in there for 5 days. That's criminal. The other board member, a woman with short gray hair, frowned. Wait, you parked in his garage? Karen hesitated. Temporarily. Without his permission? Karen's voice dropped. It's a shared space. It's not, I interrupted. Private property. Title's in my name. The gray-haired board member looked at Karen like she just realized who the real problem was. We'll need to review this. Karen turned red. Excuse me? I'm the HOA representative here? And you're supposed to follow the same rules you enforce, the woman said sharply. For once, Karen didn't have a comeback. She stood there, trembling with rage. I folded my arms, trying not to smile. You see, the issue isn't me breaking the rules. It's Karen thinking she is the rules. The man cleared his throat awkwardly. We'll need to investigate this further. Please do, I said. I'll send over the video footage of her parking in my garage and entering my property without consent. Karen's head snapped toward me. You recorded that? Of course. Home security system. I shrugged. Gotta love technology. Her smirk vanished faster than her credibility. Later that evening, the neighborhood group chat exploded. Screenshots of Karen's confrontation started circulating. Apparently, several neighbors had filmed parts of the argument. For years, people had whispered about her antics. The fake fines, the petty power trips, the unnecessary citations for unapproved mailbox paint. Now, they had proof. The next morning, someone taped a sign on the community notice board. HOA should serve the community, not control it. By noon, it had 20 signatures. Karen tore it down, of course. But another one appeared an hour later. Then another. That night, she sent out a furious email titled, Unacceptable Defiance and Misinformation. It was 5 paragraphs of pure rage, accusing certain residents, me, of spreading lies and poisoning community harmony. She even tried to threaten new fines again, but this time, no one paid attention. Instead, replies poured in. We've had enough, Karen. You can't fine people for opinions. Maybe it's time for a new HOA president. The silence that followed was golden. By the end of the week, I got a call from the HOA board. The same gray-haired woman from before sounded tired but relieved. Mr. Thompson, she said, we've completed our review. It appears Ms. Howard, Karen's last name, overstepped her authority and misused HOA resources. I smiled. I could have told you that in one sentence. She chuckled softly. We're issuing her a formal reprimand and suspending her from enforcement duties pending further evaluation. So, she's fired. Temporarily relieved of her duties, she corrected diplomatically. But yes, effectively. For a moment, I just stood there in silence, processing what I'd heard. After all the noise, all the chaos, all the fake fines and phone calls, the neighborhood bully had finally been benched. That evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset. The air smelled like rain and fresh-cut grass. Peaceful. Then, from across the street, I saw Karen storm out of her house, phone to her ear, pacing back and forth. Her voice echoed faintly. "They can't do this to me. I am the HOA." I couldn't help but smile. She wasn't yelling at me anymore, she was yelling at herself. Later that night, my neighbor, Mr. Lewis, walked over holding 2 beers. He was in his 60s, kind of quiet, but his grin said everything. "Thought you might want one," he said, handing me a bottle. "You're a bit of a hero around here." I laughed. I didn't plan to be. "Well," he said, taking a sip, "sometimes standing up to the loudest person makes everyone else realize they had a voice too." We sat there in silence for a while, listening to crickets and the faint hum of sprinklers. For the first time in a long while, the neighborhood didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like home again. And as I leaned back in my chair, I couldn't help thinking, peace had never sounded so sweet. A few weeks passed. The weather cooled, the trees turned gold, and for the first time in a long while, life in Willow Creek felt normal. Kids rode their bikes again. Neighbors waved instead of hiding behind curtains. The HOA newsletters came out on time, and for once they didn't include threats, warnings, or fines. Karen, however, had gone silent. Her house looked empty most days. The curtains stayed closed. The once busy front porch where she used to bark orders over the phone now sat quiet, until one Tuesday afternoon. I was trimming the hedge when I saw her walking toward me, slow, cautious, holding a manila envelope. She wore sunglasses, but they couldn't hide the exhaustion on her face. "Jake," she said quietly. I turned off the trimmer. "Karen, surprised to see you outside. No clipboards today?" She didn't smile. "I wanted to talk." "About?" She took a deep breath. "Everything." I leaned on the handle of the trimmer. "Go on." She handed me the envelope. Inside were a few printed papers. Legal documents, it seemed. "I overstepped," she said finally. "The HOA board made it clear. I'm no longer in charge of community enforcement." "I just wanted to clear the air." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean apologize?" Her jaw tightened as if the word was painful. "Yes, apologize for parking in your garage. For the fake fines, for everything." It was the first time I'd ever heard her speak without anger. No shouting, no threats. Just quiet words and a hint of embarrassment. I nodded slowly. "That's unexpected, but appreciated." She hesitated. "There's more." She looked down, fumbling with her hands. "My car insurance sent a letter last week. They said because of the garage incident, I technically owe you for property use during that time. The law considers it temporary tenancy." I tried not to laugh. "You're kidding." She shook her head. "They even suggested I pay rent to settle it." "So," I said, crossing my arms, "you're here to pay me rent?" She sighed. "Don't make this harder than it already is." I smiled. "No, Karen, I'm not making it harder. The law is." She pulled out a checkbook, scribbled something quickly, and tore out the page. "Here, $250. That should cover 5 days, right?" I took it, looked at the amount, then met her eyes. "You know, it's funny. You spent years trying to fine everyone in this neighborhood. Now you're the one paying," she glared. "Don't push it." "I'm not," I said calmly. "I'm just saying, life's got a sense of humor." After she left, I couldn't stop chuckling. It wasn't about the money. It was about what it represented, a full circle moment. The same woman who had tried to control everything had ended up handing me a check to settle her own mess. It felt poetic. Over the next few weeks, things only got better. The new HOA board held open meetings where residents could actually speak. The rules became simpler, fairer, and less ridiculous. Someone even suggested starting a neighborhood barbecue, something Karen had banned for safety reasons. And when the day finally came, the entire street showed up. Music, food, laughter. Even Karen made a brief appearance, standing awkwardly by the fence, pretending to check her phone while sneaking glances at everyone enjoying themselves. Mr. Lewis nudged me and whispered, "Should we invite her?" I smiled. "Nah, let her watch what freedom looks like." As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I leaned against my truck and watched the glow spill across the quiet houses. For so long, I'd thought peace meant staying silent, keeping my head down, avoiding trouble. But sometimes peace only comes after you stand your ground. Karen hadn't just parked in my garage. She'd parked herself inside everyone's lives, convinced she owned the road, the rules, and the people. And in the end, all it took to stop her was a locked door and 5 days of silence. A week later, I got a small envelope in the mail. Inside was a note written in careful handwriting. Thanks for not pressing charges. I'm selling my house and moving. Good luck, Jake. K. I read it twice, then smiled. She wasn't angry anymore, just gone. The neighborhood felt lighter, freer. The air even seemed clearer somehow. And as I tossed the letter into my drawer, I realized something. Sometimes you don't win by shouting louder. You win by staying calm, locking the door and letting karma do the talking. That night, as I sipped coffee on the porch, I heard laughter from next door. Real laughter, not the forced kind people used when Karen was around. Mr. Lewis waved from his yard. Hey, Jake, you're the reason we can finally breathe again. I raised my cup. Glad I could help. He grinned. What are you going to do with that rent check? I looked down at it, still tucked in my pocket, and laughed. Frame it, probably. As a reminder. Of what? He asked. I smiled. That sometimes the loudest people fall the hardest, and the quietest ones have the last word. And with that, I leaned back in my chair watching the stars come out one by one over Willow Creek. A neighborhood finally at peace.